we are going to keep plugging along with multilingual websites. So you can do all sorts of cool things with multilingual websites. I am going to show you an example that I have personally worked on, just a little real estate website. And here, if you want to set language settings up in your URL, and you're basically just passing up in the URL whenever you have a multilingual website. We're looking at properties here in English here in Costa Rica. But if you wanted to change this entire website to Spanish, the only thing you would have to do is click on the URL, and that's just passing a language underscore ID equals 2 or 3 or 4, however many languages you have stored, and then each language that you add numerically gets a new ID, and then this is changing the entire website to Spanish, right? And you can then also click on a specific property, right? You can click on a property, you can click on a lot here, then if you wanted to switch back to English, you can install plugins so that even on your URL mapped pages and you switch back to another language, it doesn't break, even though really, it's including the the URL mapped URL title is different between the two languages. You can, we do have plugins so that you cannot break the page and you can still resolve, things can still appear in the language that is proper. And whenever you click around to the rest of the site, you've already set that language ID in the session. And so if I click somewhere else, it goes back to the other language. Right. So you can do a lot with languages, and this is how to kind of get started. So we already looked at how to configure new languages. I think that's under types and tools. Yeah, here. In languages, we already installed French. Remember, you just add new language, and then you stick that variable here. You've got, I've got my new language here. I could actually edit oh, that's editing the variables. I could edit the language. This is where we put in the 2-letter language code, the two-letter country code, and we put the descriptions of each, because you can have French from more than just France, right? It can have different dialectic, depending upon region, differences in the way that things are translated. All right, and it tells me what language number it is here, and I can keep installing more languages and so on, just install another 2-letter language and country code, right? The second that you do that, then you enable that all over your entire site. You can then filter by language here, by all languages. And then I can see all, languages that have been converted. I can go ahead and see if I've got any content in Spanish. I've got some content in Spanish, language variables, generic content, page assets. Your pages can have different language versions as well. And for any content type, you can view the content that you've created in all of your languages. All right. Anytime you click in a language versioned file, then you can switch between all of the languages, right? And if you don't have an existing version in that language, then it will automatically say, would you like to copy the previous language that you were editing, all of the fields, all of the properties, all of the binary fields, all of the images, everything over into this new version. Now, what it does is it's kind of smart, and if there is a binary field, a photo, let's just say, that's shared by all of the versions, it never makes a new photo. So let me go back to the the movie content type here, and let's say we're going to add okay, we'll throw some release date, which is prior, so I can publish it, and I'll choose from my posters, I've got Guardians of the Galaxy here. And I'll say it's action, adventure, fantasy. Okay. And maybe I'd put Marvel. Superheroes. And okay. Save and publish. All right. So now I've got Guardians of the Galaxy. I could find a poster in Spanish. There we go. And I can manage that as a completely different file, right? So I'm going to save that here on my desktop under demos and posters, but make sure it has the same exact name, but I'm going to put it in a new folder here locally because I don't want to replace my other ones. I'll put Spanish and I'll save it there. That is a JPEG as well, I hope. Okay. And I'm going to do something else that's kind of cool. I want to maybe auto-translate. So I want to get a little more text so I can auto-translate. Okay, that's not much, but it's good enough. Okay. All right. If you want to auto-translate, then I would have to come over here to my Google Analytics, Google Map, Google Analytics. Let me see. Oh, I have to paste that inside the workflow. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to step inside the workflow that's controlling my content, which is my movie content. Let me just make sure that that is the regular system workflow and I didn't create a custom one. I can see there that system workflow. Okay, types and tags. I go to that workflow. And then if you want to enable auto translation, obviously, there are issues with automatically translating things. No service is perfect. But let's just say I wanted to add a new workflow action that is translate. Right? And I'll say that the admin user can use it. Shows up for all of these sub actions. Current user, that's fine. And then I want to add a translate content sub action. I don't need to notify the assignee and save. Okay, now whenever you go into translate, it automatically will do all of the text fields, but you need a service API key. So I'm going to look in my notes for a good service API key. And see if I can get that installed for you. Okay. So we're going to throw a service API key in there. We're going to save that. And what this will do is it'll automatically translate the content whenever you say you want to, you click on the content, it'll automatically create the other versions for you. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to my Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, I have to put that workflow step on the rest because I already published him, so he's not in that first part. So the nice thing is I can just grab and drag my translate here and here and here, and now he's in all steps. Well, I guess I don't need it in the archive step. That's going too far. All right, so now that's instantly translatable. And now I step in, and then even though he's in the publish step, I have the translate button, right? Now, I don't know whether I need lock for editing, but I think I probably should be. And I'm going to click translate. He has no other language versions right now, right? So I'm going to click translate. And it automatically creates all of my other language versions and translates all of the fields for me, right? Now, that doesn't take care of the images. It's not magic, right? So I do step into Guardians of the Galaxy. It Google translates Guardianes de la Galaxia. It Google Translate it. It translates all the description. And tell you what, Google Translate's getting better every single day. And you can also, I think there's a plugin also for Amazon. So if you wanted to use Amazon's translation service instead of Google or some other, it's easily doable by extending that plugin or making a small adjustment of this plugin. All right. Now what I would want to do as a last step is I would have somebody in my workflow. Maybe I would have a translate to Spanish that not only would have that translation key, but also would assign it to the person who's competent in Spanish enough to check this and make sure that the auto translation is correct. And then that person would also be responsible for removing the English version of the picture and then taking that poster, getting the Spanish version, uploading that to the Spanish version, right? And now I've got my Spanish version of my file, and I save and publish, right? And then I can also look and switch to my French version and see my French was translated as well. I don't know whether that first initial should be a capital G, but I'm going to make it so. And you can see that the text field was translated, accents and all, right? And then I would have to, put my poster in French as well, which I think you guys already got the idea. All right, so there's all my versions. If I go to the history tab, then I can see all of my versions, including I just made a new change to French, making the title uppercase as opposed to the previous version lowercase. All right, so everything's tracked in the system, even your auto translation of those versions as well. So pretty cool, right? Gives you a lot of help there with your files. Once again, if you're going to do, we already did this earlier, but if you're doing the language variables, right? So if you're creating a menu, if you're doing anything with your pages, you can go ahead and create content using the language variable. We already went ahead and did this on our pages, and then you just do a text.get of that key. In case you weren't there for one of the previous sessions, here in this part, multilingual site management. Might just be in that top level doc. Let's see if I can just do a text.get. There we go, global language variables. And that's under configuring languages, and then so it's tertiary. And here you'll see the language variable content type. and then you just do a text.get on whatever the key is, and then no matter which language version you switch to, then you'll always get the value for the right language, right? We already did that. So I'll remind you by maybe sending you that documentation, but we've already done that before, right? And then you would just need to, if we were going to put this on a page, let's see, we already have our training and our movie listing. If we look at our listings now, and let's see, we should change our file to list more than, well, I guess we could go to page 2, but let me just adjust. Oh, that is my widget. I would have to go to my content type, my widget content type, which is widget, and movie listing. Oh, I guess I could have changed that right on the page. Gosh darn it. I just need to edit my widget. And I say I want to see 4 movies per page. Save and publish. And didn't I? Per page 4, number of movies only 3. What language version am I looking at? English. Is it not published? Movies. And I do have that published. Let me see if it's cache. That 15-second page cache kills me sometimes. I forget to take it off my pages because I think he should be pulling, unless I got to pull in by category or something. I forget. I'd have to look at my widget code. Title ascending. Date descending. Why is my new movie not there? Okay. I don't know what I did to my widget, but I know I also had a simple widget. Simple widget. And if I do movie, search. Oh, and it was a BTL include. There we go. Movie listing. And system host. Categories. Five. Save and publish. I have no idea what I did in my code that is not showing my new movie. Types movies. Oh, maybe I saved it to system host or something. Not sure. Okay. It was my date range. It was static. So I'm going to put 08, 0831, lock for editing, save and publish. Hey, and now I don't have to. I don't have to be looking at it in Spanish or English or anything. I think I'm looking at my page in Spanish. So I'll go to English and yeah, okay. So and that is the next thing I was going to show you. If you your widgets automatically do what's called fall through. Okay. So if I switch to Spanish right now, it shows me all of the content using that same widget, even though the widget was not created, the widget itself doesn't have a Spanish version. I could click on my movie listing BTL, and I could actually create Spanish and French versions of it and actually code differently, but widgets persist across all pages regardless of language version, as long as the default language is there. So now I can switch automatically to French, and it's going to pull my French that was auto-translated, right? Now I would have to, instead of calling my category name, I would have to call maybe a text.get on a key that matched that category name. I could still load the category as a key and then auto-translate it using the text.get around that key name, right? But that's how the widgets fall through. If you do the auto-generated, the form content type, those fall through. Pages fall through because I don't have a French version of my page, right? So it's just automatically having the default language fall through so that my page didn't break whenever I set it to French. However, I could go to my page properties and I could actually add a French or a Spanish version of my page, and then I could go ahead and change the page title, etc. For my page, I could change all the SEO description, SEO keywords on a page language version by page language version basis, and it will get picked up. Now, what falls through and what doesn't, and what can you configure? If we once again go, and I think I already have it in my text wrangler here. If we go to that .marketing config properties file, there we go. Then we can see right from the beginning, this defines your backend language, the default language country. So that'll define that default language that falls through. It's English by default, but you could change that to whatever language you want, depending upon what's the default language for your client. And then we can say default content to default language. That's automatically false. Like if somehow I don't create a movie in French, it could automatically fall back to the English, even though I'm actually in French. That's set to false by default. If you don't have French content, you've got a static page or you got a dynamic poll or anything like that, it's not going to automatically display any other language version, including the default. But if you were statically placing movie reviews or something like that, and you did want it to fall through, just in case you don't want workflow to control it and make sure that each language version is created, you just have type sensitive content, and the most important version is the default version. And you don't want blank pages, and you don't want a rigid control system on your workflow, then you could set it to fall through the default language. You'd have to set that to true. Default widgets to default language. That way your widgets don't disappear whenever you switch to a second or a third or a fourth language and so on. That is true. So all your dynamic code will pull, except you have to have the existing other language content that the widget can pull, but the widget will try. Yeah, and you only have to create the widget once in your default language, and then in every other language it will try and pull the content for the language version that the user's session is switched to, but of course the content has to exist. Default content to default language, it's similar to that, but it's only for pages. So default page to default language, that is true by default. Your pages won't break
just because you switch to another language and you don't actually have a version of the page content created in that other language, it will fall through. But your SEO, metadata and stuff like that, that will all be wrong because you didn't ever create a new page version, and it'll all be in the default language, right? Default file to default language is also true. So if we had placed a movie review or something like that, and we don't create, or we place a PDF or something like that on a page, we don't create the multilingual files, it will still persist. That same PDF will be downloadable, again and again, regardless of whenever we switch to language version. So all of those are the default settings. You could change those if you wished. Okay. And once again, we have in our system, I showed in that whenever we were covering view tools, how to get the language out of the header. So whenever we're looking at view tools, so out of the browser here, the request.get header accept language, right? So you can dynamically kind of change and react to those values. We also have in our rules engine, remember, we have the ability for you to react to the browser language, the user's visitor's country, is a certain country. Then you could set not only persona, but you could set something else like set a session attribute language ID. Equals 2, right? That would set it to Spanish based upon some rule or condition, the visitor's country or something like that. So you can do all of those things here with no code, right? Or you could do it, in your VTL files. So you can do both. We've also given you examples here in the geolocation data. So we've given you this geolocation page. So if you do find out, like it's right now finding me in Heredia province, Costa Rica, that's exactly where I am, right? It's finding me right here. This is where I am. This is where our office is in Costa Rica. You can see I'm in the Heredia province, right? So it's automatically finding me. And then you could, based upon this data we're returning, we have all the code there right in our VTL that you can copy. You could automatically, do something, show certain data based upon the geolocation information as well, right? Or pull content differently, etc. Of course, the browser is going to pop up something on the front end that says, hey, this site's trying to know where you are in the world. Do you want to allow it? Right? So there's multiple ways to respond to location or language. One's no code, one's, code. There's also rewrite filters. So if you did say, and we have had some clients say, look, my website in English is not a direct map to my website in Spanish or in French or in, Russian or Chinese or whatever. So they actually are kind of different content. Maybe they'll share some content. Maybe we want to use the global content, the system host on some of our content types using host or folder fields, but it's basically different sites. So you can actually create different sites, manage them as different hosts, right? Using the host manager. So you could create different sites and have, an EN, ES, FR, and then you could use filters, so rewrite filters. So if you look at rewrite, here's you can use URL rewrite rules. We use a mod rewrite called Tucky, in the Java implementation, and there's documentation there. You can write rewrite rules, and if they click on a language in the header or something like that, then you could actually direct them to that, your version of your website /ES or something